of these really iconic elements. And Rome was really easy. My father's side of the family is originally from Middle East. We started spending a lot of time there. And then I started working out from there. Bridges. This is Ponte Umberto overlooks the Bridge of Angels, Ponte San Angelo, and of course, the Vatican. Another thing too, it's really nice. I like photographing bridges and water because with water, nobody can get in front of you. It's really quite convenient. And nobody can jump in front of you and do a selfie right here. But this is a really nice location. Rome just somehow has these beautiful sunsets too. So I spent a lot of time there. Let's try something a little bit more difficult. What about Paris? Is there anything iconic in Paris? I know. It's also in Vegas now. Arguably, you could go to Vegas. You wouldn't have to find the Eiffel Tower. The first few times I went to Paris, I was terrified of photographing the Eiffel Tower. I don't know why. Like it was such a strong, iconic element. I was like, I don't know if I really want to go there. So what I decided to do was just try different vantage points. I wanted to see what the city looked like. This is shot from, it's called the Montparnasse Tower. And there's a universal rule: if you ever visit France and you speak a word of French and it's not perfect, they'll tell you it's not perfect. So I'm pretty sure I said that wrong. But it's the Montparnasse Tower, and what I like to do is get like a view of the city. So I shot this before I had Google Maps on my phone. Do you guys remember traveling with paper maps?
Yeah.
Wasn't that fun?
Yeah.
It was really fun. Now I feel spoiled because I'll just load the GPS everywhere I go, and I'm like, there it is, there it is. But this was a really good way for me to see the city, to get above it, to get a good vantage point. And then I thought about the old and the new, so the Eiffel Tower being very new. And I found out that for the summertime, you can actually climb Notre Dame and you can see the gargoyles. And gargoyles are kind of like these old sentinels over the city. So I started to think about juxtaposition, not just the elements, but the lighting, the old city looking at the new city, or sort of the watchman of the city. And those are the cities, but then it started to get into landscapes and individual countries. Now, 6-7 years ago, Iceland was not as famous as it is now for photography, but approaching it, if you have to sum up Iceland with an element, what would you sum it up with, do you think? Ice, yeah? Can you guys think of other things? Maybe some of the most beautiful and powerful waterfalls in Europe? That's something that Iceland has, and it's a beautiful place to visit. Like this is Aldeyjarfoss, and you can actually walk right up to the edge and capture it. Beautiful. So Iceland is more landscape. We can definitely boil it down to landscapes. And what everybody said first, of course, there's ice. You gotta see the ice. Everybody wants to see the ice. If you haven't been to Jökulsárlón yet, you have to go and you have to see this. Every day, it actually just goes this through the tide. There's a channel that goes out to the sea, and then it washes up on the beach. So if you guys have seen those photos of the icebergs on the black sand beach, that's right across the street from here. So every day, ice goes out, comes back in, washes back in on the beach. Beautiful place to photograph. Very iconic and representative of the country. So let's get into something a little bit more. Like this one, Japan I visited now for every year for 7 years. I'm about to go back after this. I'll be back in Japan in 5 days. I'll be in Tokyo. What do you guys think of Japan? Oh, Mount Fuji, yeah, definitely Mount Fuji. And also, bamboo forest. Serenity. It's this calm, this peacefulness, the bamboo forest. And of course, what really attracted me and attracts a lot of people to Japan, this is why I'm going next week, is the cherry blossoms and the castles. I'd love to say that they're old castles, but they're not. These are actually pretty new. This is Osaka Castle. It was rebuilt about 100 years ago. Now, when the shogun and the Japanese within feudal times, they used to conquer a city and they burn it down. So all of the stuff that you're seeing, when you see it, they say the oldest castle, like Himeji Castle, which is 400 or 500 years old. That's very special because usually things burn down. But one thing that they have done is the Japanese are meticulous about the gardening, the cherry blossoms. There are millions of cherry blossom trees. And so that kind of gets into not only thinking about the place, but thinking about the season, and then also choosing the right moments in time. So this is the key to it. In the beginning it was find the locations, research the locations, and figure out exactly where I want to shoot. So I usually spend time. Now, I mean, this was before the iPhone. Now I walk around the city with my iPhone, and I know if I shoot with the iPhone, 28 to 30 millimeter, I'm going to want to zoom in a little bit, or I'm going to want to shoot wider, and then I go back and I get the camera and the lens. Before, I'd walk around the city. I'd walk for Rome for a few days, and I'd go back at certain times of day. And the times of day that I use are basically all around sunrise and sunset, but they have some slight variations. So the first thing, step number one, find a beautiful spot to sit and set up the camera. So here, how many of you guys have been to Santorini? A few of you guys? This is a beautiful place, I have to say. So I had to sit here, I had to suffer in Santorini for 4 hours to see what happens with the light. Now what happens throughout this time lapse is, first thing, we're waiting for the sunset. Hopefully we get some nice color. You can see it's obviously a little bit busy. As it transitions though, something really interesting happens. The lights come on in the city. And we enter what's called the blue hour. And then it turns full dark. So that's about 4 hours. And 4 hours, I sat there, I recorded the time lapse for educational purposes, works perfectly in this case. But 4 hours translates into one moment in time that I select as the final photograph. In this case, I went with the blue hour, which I'm going to explain. Now, I do this all over the place. I'll stay. So that was easier in Santorini. I think if the sunset was 7 o'clock, maybe I arrived at 4:30 and stayed. This is Hong Kong. This is before sunrise, so it means I had to get up at about 2:30 a.m. To capture this. You guys know what the biggest difference between sunrise and sunset is? Sunset happens at night, exactly. And it's a much more reasonable time of day. So this is the opposite. This is a blue hour, the morning after a typhoon. And as that transitions, you see the lights start to fade. So if I wanted to get all the lights in the city, I'd have to be there very early. Or I'd have to wait for the sun to sort of come up. This was actually a really interesting morning 2 years ago, actually, when I thought a typhoon in Hong Kong would be really cool. But it turns out when you're in a tall building, it's just gray and a little windy. It's actually quite boring. But the weather after typhoons is extraordinary. Now this is where later in the presentation I'm going to get into something I've been doing for a while, and that's blending time. So the last shot, Santorini, was one moment at a time. But what I wanted to do here was utilize the sun, the natural light from the sun, and the lights from the city, and put it together. So that's a few hours together, and we're going to get into that. But it all builds on these basic times of day. And you get kind of a little bit spoiled as a landscape photographer. You like the golden hours. Golden hours are really cool. They work a little bit better than the middle of the afternoon, because what happens, and in this part of the world too, you guys would kind of have that smoky, hazy sky, so the golden hour happens when it's really clear, and you start to see these beautiful highlights on the buildings. If you ever visit New York City, it looks like a cartoon, just these crazy, beautiful highlights. Now the reason they call it golden hour or magic hour is because the sun's so low in the sky that it actually gets filtered by the atmosphere. It gets filtered and turns into very soft, warm light. And in this case, this is Seljalandsfoss, southern Iceland. If I would have waited another 10 minutes, the sun would have gone behind the clouds and the foreground would have been completely dark. So I waited for the last possible moment for the light to come through, illuminate the backside of the waterfall and the waterfall itself. And golden hour is fun. So this is Valensole, southern France, the lavender fields. They've become very famous as well too. One thing I can say about this is it's the best smelling photography destination on the planet. I guarantee it's amazing. It smells really good. Rome, not so much, but Valensole, really nice. This is the first 90 seconds of sunlight on the rows of lavender, 90 seconds. So 90 seconds prior to this, there was no light. So they were actually a different color. They were actually sort of just blue. But as soon as the light hit them, there was still enough color in the sky to sort of illuminate them. And we got kind of spoiled. Spent 7 days, 7 mornings shooting Valensole. And after 90 seconds to 2 minutes of light, we called it quits for the morning and went, mispronounced everything we were ordering in little French cafes, and then came back for the sunset. So golden hour is cool. And somebody mentioned Mount Fuji as well. Sometimes it's about finding a harmony of light. And I learned this actually in Japan. The Japanese like to take photos during the day of something special that to us doesn't really make sense, but to them is something meaningful. So this is a very much more famous place. This is a town called Fuji Yoshida. Chiraya Pagoda on the right, Mount Fuji in the background, and cherry blossoms in the foreground. And this is an early morning that I started, but this is actually about 2 hours after sunrise. And the reason is before the sun was kind of illuminating Mount Fuji and then the pagoda and then the cherry blossoms. So I waited for the total amount of light to illuminate the scene. So sometimes it's a little bit longer than we intend to wait to get all the light. But it never compares to sunrise and sunset. So just show of hands, who hates sunset? Nobody ever has raised their hand. Nobody hates sunset. We all love sunsets. Whether we're photographers, whether we're on our honeymoon or just with our friends, Sunsets are beautiful. When you see the sky light up, it's something incredible. And as photographers, it's something we really look for. So one, establish a beautiful place and then try to use the colors of the sky. So this beautiful village, Vernazza in northwestern Italy, you can see that there's a lot of colors in the buildings, a lot of colors in the sky. And now with raw technology and what we're able to do in post-processing, we can literally shoot right into the sun and balance those colors. So it can be really beautiful. And I like to do this all over the world. And this is a neighboring town, Rio Maggiore. It's really beautiful as well. And you can see that this is kind of a golden hour, but it's a fringe sort of golden hour and sunset. So remember how I said that sun had that nice filtered effect? This is that time of day when you can actually shoot into the sun and still maintain the shape of the sun. And the nice thing is that the sun's still in the sky, starting to get illumination on the left side of the buildings, water spray, little things like that. It really adds up to just beautiful colors. This is an interesting location. This is in Dunedin, the South Island of New Zealand. Somebody sent me a photo of this recently. There's only like 3 or 4 of these pylons left. And what really drew me to this location is, you guys see there's an island, like dead center? And this is a very, let's say, turbulent beach, right? Big waves are coming in, and these pylons are getting washed out, and there's nothing else around for miles. And I just couldn't figure out what the Kiwis were thinking. Like, were they trying to build out to this island? Did they put like 5 of these things in, and they're like, forget it, it's impossible? And even when I was photographing this, like in the morning, people were jogging by or walking their dog, and they're like, what are you doing? Like, these are just sticks in the ground, or it's just sticks in the sand, mate. And I'm like, well, yeah, but it's beautiful photography. And they're like, all right, and they just leave, you know? But I just thought it was something really interesting. And it was actually my first morning there, and as you can see, I got lucky. I only had to get up one morning to get the sunrise that I was looking for. So sometimes we have to spend a lot of time, but lately I really like shooting into the sun. I think this is a really fun thing, and it's something that we can all do too. So the other sun shots you saw low in the sky, and get the glow of the sun. Anytime the sun touches the side of a cloud or an object and it's particularly clear, you can turn the f-stop past f11, maybe 13, 16, up to 22, and it'll define a starburst shape. So in this case, we can shoot directly into the sun and get this really pretty effect. This is Mesa Arch in Canyonlands National Park. It is a very busy shooting location. I learned that when I was there. But after seeing the photos, I looked at the photos and I thought, you know, I bet everybody makes this arch red. I just thought it has to be something in post-processing. But when I was there, I discovered that for about 15 minutes, this whole arch just illuminates red. So it actually is a very beautiful, beautiful place to photograph. So sunrises and sunset, you know, anytime, I'm sure if you guys are like me, even if I'm not shooting on a project or not doing anything, if I have my camera with me and I'm just driving and I see a sunset, I'll shoot the sunset. I'm just compelled to. And you guys in post-processing, you'll see why, because sometimes I'll use pieces of it. But my favorite time to shoot is the blue hour. Now, I wrote blue hour and twilight. So the reason we call it blue hour is a time of day and twilight is a vampire movie. So you don't want to confuse people when you start talking about how much you love Twilight. You might give them the wrong idea. I'll also say blue hour because blue hour can be an hour. It can be perpetual if you're in Sweden in the summer, or it can be. I was just in Dubai. We call it the gray hour and the blue 5 minutes. Like it just happens so fast. But essentially, it's a harmony between artificial light and natural light. And it works particularly well when you have artificial light from a town like this, and then you have the ambient light of the sky. Also, works as a blue hour because the sky is still blue. Since there's light in the sky, though, what happens is that light will actually illuminate the scene. So you're seeing details in the rocks, you're seeing green in the trees. If you wait a little bit longer, full dark, you lose that. You lose the ability to get the ambient lighting, and then the lighting in the town becomes too harsh. It's too bright, overpowers everything else. So you kind of, after sunset, or if you have to get up super early before sunrise, you just wait and you shoot through it. And you have sort of early, mid, and late blue hour, and you just find that perfect balance between the light. It's really fun to do. It's a beautiful time to be in these places. So often you can find yourself, especially in the morning blue hour, all by yourself. Well, this is actually pretty close to where the bamboo forest is. This is the Gion district in Kyoto. The Geisha district, where you see a bunch of photographers chase them as they run away, because they don't like to come out anymore. So many people like to photograph them. But you can see this is very interesting because the blue hour is nice. So there's really one single light source here on the lower right, that big tungsten yellow light. But you can see with the blue, the cool of the sky against the warm of the foreground really works because they're complementary colors. So we can start to take advantage of that lighting, even if it's really simple lighting. And Hallstatt in Austria, has anybody been to Hallstatt? So I found out a little bit of history that it was about 600-700 years ago. The guy who designed this town predicted there'd be photographers, and he decided to lay it out perfectly. I mean, you literally walk around the corner on the little street and it looks like this. Really beautiful place. But what I like is the blue hour because it's hard in the mountains, if you're in the mountains, to do sunrise and sunset. Because you always end up with light, like harsh light and angles of light and shadows and different things like that. So after the sunrise here, nothing's ever fully illuminated or just the mountaintops are illuminated. But during the blue hour, you get the artificial light of the town coming in, plus still the natural light from the sky. And I'll have a before and after to show you this too, when we get into post-processing. The blue hour also gives you the ability to capture really interesting things, like the Singapore laser show. So this is cool. It's just dark enough where we can start capturing the lights. You can see that the Helix Bridge is all illuminated with the lights and also have the lights of the laser show. I thought this was the most amazing laser show in the world until I just saw the laser show on the Burj Khalifa last week. Has anybody seen that?
Yeah.
Wow. Like I saw it from a building and I'm like, that's pretty cool, but then when I was at ground level, I was speechless. Like it lit up the sky. So if you guys have a chance to see that. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to photograph it, but it's fun to photograph this kind of stuff and just try to get all these colors and lights together. And speaking of Dubai, this is, if you guys want to photograph this location, this is the Sheraton Four Points Hotel on Sheikh Zayed Road. It's actually a rooftop restaurant and bar, so they're very cool about letting people shoot up there. I've been visiting Dubai for about, I think, 7 years now. And I've always wanted to capture the fog. So 2 years ago, this was my first experience with the fog, and this is going to sound funny, I'm on the 43rd floor, and I'm too low. So level 43 in Dubai is basically the basement. So I'm in the fog, I'm not above it. But it was cool, it looks kind of like Blade Runner, Future City, a different thing like that. But it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but I still liked the blue hour, but then you see how the lights illuminate the clouds, and there's all this stuff going on that makes it quite unique. You know, something a little bit more special than a normal cloudy day. This is still one of my favorite places to visit in the world, Bhutan. And you guys are pretty close by to Bhutan. This is Tiger's Nest. It's a few kilometer hike to get up here. This is also shot during the blue hour, but this photo has a pretty interesting story because I wasn't even there for basic photography. I was there as doing time-lapse and video to document this crazy thing that they do. It's called the Tour of the Dragon. It's the longest one-day mountain bike race in the world. You guys heard of this? They basically start at 11 p.m. one night, and they have to finish by midnight the next night, and they travel all the way across Bhutan, all the way up and down the peaks. They don't stop the traffic or road construction or anything. These guys are crazy, and they do this. We filmed this leading up to it. We had one day off at the end to go visit Tiger's Nest. And we went early afternoon, got up to the top, and I was like, this place is amazing. Like it's just like the photos you see. You come around the corner and you see this amazing this zone that's just perfectly laid out for photography. Clouds are moving by because we're at high altitude. And I was thinking, I want to stay here and shoot it for the blue hour. So I turned to my guide, who's now a really good friend of mine, and I'm like, Yanten, how long have you been a guide? He's like, 20 years. I'm like, that's awesome, man. So how many times have you been up here? How many times have you hiked here? He's like, I don't know, thousands of times? I'm like, okay, cool, so we can stay here for sunset. Yeah, if you want. Do they light it up at night? He's like, I don't know. Yanten, you just said you've been up here thousands of times, and you live in Paro, like down at the bottom. Yeah. So you don't know if this lights up? He's like, no, I have no idea. Well, why not? He's like, because nobody's ever asked to stay up here that long. He's like, can we stay up here that long? He's like, sure, if you want. And I'm like, okay, great. So the director of the project, he had lung surgery recently, so he took his time. Like, I hurried up, wanted to get the photo. Tim comes up, and Tim's like, oh, this is so amazing, and if you picture like an old hippie, from the United States, or like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. That's Tim Gorski, he's great. And he's like, oh, this is amazing, it's so beautiful. You know, I was like, Tim, you cool with staying up here for a while, just the sunset? And he's like, yeah, we can camp out here all night if you want. I'm like, well, we're not gonna do that, but we're gonna like hang out. He's like, okay, but if we're gonna stay up here, we're gonna need a beer. And I'm like, Tim, we're at the top of a mountain in Bhutan next to Tiger's Nest. There's no way that's gonna happen. There's no restaurant, there's not anything. Yanten, our guy, says, I know a place. And I'm like, what? And he just disappears. And I'm like, now I'm left alone. And I'm like, I don't know if they're going to light it up at night. I can't see any power cables. You know, I have no idea. So the monks walk by, and they're doing some restoration. They have the paints. The guys walk by, and I kind of walk up to them, and I'm like, hey, guys. They're like, hello. Thankfully, everybody speaks English. Do you guys live here, right? And they're like, uh-huh, yeah, we live here. Do you have electricity? They just looked at me like I was an idiot. They're like, uh-huh. We live here. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a stupid question. So you light this, there's lights at night. They said, yes, we've covered that. We have electricity. So they left, and we stayed through, photographed through the blue hour and everything. Fog was moving in, got this photo, was really happy. As we're packing up, has anybody been to Bhutan? They wear this thing called a go, and it's called the biggest pocket in the world. My photography friends there, they can take like a D5 of the 7200. Like, and I have the 2470. It's crazy. So Yanten comes up with 3 big things. And I'm just like, I don't even know how you did that. There's no place. He's like, oh, I hiked all the way down, drove to town, and hiked all the way back up. It's like, oh man, like I'm still winded from the hike. So we got down to the bottom. What was interesting about this, I was really happy. And we were working for the tourism agency, and they looked at this photo and they're like, we've never seen it lit up before. We've never seen a photo of it lit up before. And I'm like, how is that even possible, guys? You've lived here your whole life. They're like, we've never seen it like that before. We were working with the royal family too, and the prince of Bhutan, he looked at it and he said, this is the most beautiful photo I've seen of Tiger's Nest. Can we hang this in the royal palace? And I'm like, yeah, you can hang it in the royal palace. And it was interesting, so we sent him a photo. I'm still trying to get him to do a selfie next to it. He wants to do a selfie, but his social media guy's like, not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. But it taught me something really important. This is just a blue hour shot. The weather looks nice, everything looks great. I didn't go out of my way, which later I'll show you ways that I've gone out of my way. I just stayed a little bit longer. And by staying a little bit longer, I ended up with a unique shot. I was one of the first people to capture it with the lights on. So that's where, if you think you should stay longer, stay a little bit longer. Sometimes it doesn't take anything extraordinary. Just a little bit more effort. So it kind of, it made me think a little bit more, and it leads into some other things, and that's watching the weather. This is something that I do constantly, is watch the weather. Whether it's seasonal variations of things, or knowing when I'm going to get rain, or monsoon, or staying when there's going to be clouds or no clouds for astrophotography. Everything in my photography revolves around skies, using skies as a compositional element, using skies as leading lines, or just finding drama in a scene. And this was one of the first shots that I was capturing, one of the first locations for my portfolio back in 2010, Meteora in central Greece, beautiful place. We were there for 4 days, exhausted our budget completely with horrible rainy weather. And on the 4th day, the rain started to clear. And when I saw the rain started to clear, I grabbed a taxi to this top. And then I was in the fog, had to come down a little bit, and ended up shooting and was able to capture the swirling fog. And I'd already kind of written the day off and the whole trip like it was going to be a complete failure. And then on the last day, the weather opened up. And it taught me to really watch the skies, you know, and it taught me that these elements like rain, fog, even blizzards now in Iceland. I love blizzards. I don't know why. I'm from Florida, I'm from the tropics, and I love blizzards. This phenomenon of low clouds or fog is something really special in photography. And the ground fog in Tuscany is something really nice too. And I spent a couple of years visiting Tuscany and photographing it, and one time we just decided to stay, because it's one of those things where you have to visit multiple times to be able to get these shots that you want, but we decided to stay for about 10 days. So the fog, it happens fairly consistently in Tuscany, but not in the same place. Depends on the moisture, it depends on the dew point. So for 8 mornings, every morning I'd wake up at about 3 a.m., so very, very early sunrise in the springtime, before 6 a.m., like 5:30. So I'd wake up and I'd actually go out to the car, and if I did this on the car and there was dew on the car, I knew there was going to be good fog in that morning. And I'd drive out, put the camera on a tripod, there's no light, I can't see anything, it was near a new moon, sometimes there were clouds. Put the camera on a 30-second exposure, super high ISO, and I'd shoot. And I'd just wait. And then I'd see where the fog was. And based on where the fog was, I'd drive around. So for 8 mornings, I drove around, didn't get what I wanted, and then finally on the 8th morning, I woke up and was able to get the fog exactly where I wanted. So that was 8 mornings of getting up really early, which is kind of hard to do in Italy when you want to go out and eat late and all these things. But can you guys guess what I did on the 9th day? Nothing. Nothing. That's the answer. I slept all day on the 9th day. I was like, I'm not picking, I don't care if there's epic fog. It's not, I don't want to know. In fact, if there is, don't tell me. I'm just sleeping. So it's cool because it's kind of trained me to think about things. Now, I like to talk about artistic vision. I like to talk about having goals, and you can see so far I've showed a focused concentration on a style of work. What that started to do is it limited me in some ways. So this is Venice. From this perspective is actually from Ponte Accademia, the Accademia Bridge. It's a really cool location, and about September-ish, October, the sun rises dead center. Dead center. So for 4 years, I just visit Venice because I was always in Italy at the time for a few days. And every single time, there'd be overcast or it'd be rain. The climate in Venice is actually really bad. It's like very inconsistent, or it was just too clear. And I tried over and over and over again on multiple visits to get this shot. And then one night we just decided, you know what, let's just do a sunset shoot, even though the sunset's behind us, and let's see what happens with the clouds. And my wife and I were sitting there, and a little thunderstorm came through. And we're like, oh, this is kind of cool. So we just started clicking away and capturing different things. And when I went back and started editing this, after looking at years of attempts, I decided that I actually liked the blue hour with a little lightning strike better than any of the other attempts at the sunrise. So I was like, huh, okay. I've been focusing on this so much that I overlooked something else that could be really special. Blue hour, or capturing a thunderstorm. And usually, before I was into photography, if there was a thunderstorm, I didn't really want to be out in it. Now I want to be out in it, which is a little dangerous. But you guys know Reddit? You guys use Reddit? Okay. Well, even on like Flickr, things get on Reddit. Reddit is like, Reddit is when news articles go online on Reddit. Reading the comments is like playing Call of Duty with 10-year-olds. It's really crazy. So this got on Reddit, and everybody's like, oh, the photographer just composited lightning. It must be nice to just Photoshop everything. And I was like, why would I, if I was going to Photoshop lightning in it, I'd probably pick better lightning than that, right? I'd pick lightning like this. Yeah, that's not Photoshop, but the point is, like, I really wanted to capture lightning like this, but there was a small little storm. So last year when I was in Florence, I was leading a photo tour, and this is a very famous vantage point, and there's hundreds of people up here taking these photos, and all of a sudden this storm just started to brew. And it was just lightning strike after lightning strike, and like lightning would strike, 1,000 people go ooh, and like strike again, ah, and like you see all the people with the cameras, selfie sticks, all this stuff going on. And I was just telling my group, I'm like, guys, it's turning into blue hour. Just set your camera, whatever composition you want, just set it to rapid fire. So I was shooting like 15 or 20-second exposures over and over and over again. I shot 1,000, maybe 2,000 exposures, so we could actually capture this lightning. And I noticed it was moving closer and closer and closer and closer. And I also grew up in the tropics with hurricanes. I'm like, guys, we need to get out of here right now. And we did. And as we're getting out of there, all the other people, like all the tourists, are going, ooh, ah. And I'm like, this is not going to end well for them. Then all of a sudden it's like, ah, like it's storming, thunderstorm. But I'm continuously impressed that I learn so much from photography every time. And now, you know, I'm always waiting for the perfect weather. Now I'm waiting for unique things. So I love lightning storms, which probably isn't the safest style of photography, but it definitely is fun. And as far as fog and things coming together, so you guys saw 8 mornings or 4 years in Venice. This is the culmination of 7 years of visiting Dubai, multiple times a year, because if you want to do the fog in Dubai, it can happen in October, but it's probably going to happen November through February, maybe early March. So you have to make multiple visits. And for years, I'd go twice a year. Every time I'd arrive on a Wednesday and everybody says, oh man, the fog was amazing on Tuesday. You just missed it. And I'm like, well, I'll be here for 10 days. And then I'd leave on a Thursday and they're like, oh, the fog's coming on Friday. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Every single time. It got to be this big joke with all my friends in Dubai. Like they kind of laughed at me. They were like, it's better when you're not here. The fog. So I was their reverse good luck charm. I don't even know how that works. So I was, the way I got this shot was very interesting. I was in Bhutan scouting the eastern Bhutan, further than tourists usually go, where there's no hotels, closer to the border, which is really lovely because you stay with local families and farm homes, and it's really nice. But it was also really cold, so we stayed in farm homes for a couple weeks. It's -2 degrees Celsius, so you try to like wash up in the morning and the pipes are frozen, and you're like, okay, this is nice, really nice, but I want, you know, some luxury after this, you know, at least a real shower. So I convinced my wife that we could stay at the Shangri-La in Dubai, because that's where we were going. I was like, it's going to cost a little bit more, but can we do 5-star after this? She said, absolutely. She's friends with the social media manager. She gave me a good rate. And I remember thinking, like, it's March. This chances of the fog happening, not so high. But you know what? I'm there for 5 days, just in case. But I really had no expectations. It was the first time I went to Dubai and said, I don't care. I don't care, you know, about shooting. I've shot here before, but just in case. So the first morning I was up there, this is the 42nd floor. It's the basement. The first morning I was up there, it was so foggy I couldn't see anything. On the second morning, and the first morning too, I should add, it was very busy. Photographers everywhere and everybody was disappointed because we couldn't get a good shot. The second morning, it looked like this, and it was just my wife, Naomi, and I. Nobody else showed up the entire morning. Because everybody assumed with fog like this, the Shangri-La would be so busy that there'd be no space. So we had the whole spot. So this is about a 5-shot pano. The other thing that I found out is fog like this is low fog. Because remember, I'm staying in the basement. This is low fog and clouds. This only happens once every 7 or 8 years. So even though I spent 7 years trying to get the fog, I eventually ended up by trying over and over again to get something that I really like that's unique. So what you see is usually the result of a lot of work. No matter which photographer you look at, no matter what work you look at, you might say, wow, that animal's captured in the perfect pose. But you didn't see the thousands of other shots where it wasn't. It takes time and patience. And those are the times of day, really concentrating on the time today. But what if you want to do something different? And this is where it was really interesting, because remember I was telling you guys that I'd scout things thoroughly for days sometimes, and I'd figure out the positions. When I first got started, I'd scout a location, I'd set up the camera, I'd shoot through sunset, I'd move the camera, I'd get all these different compositions. And then when I was in post-processing in Lightroom later, I'd kick myself saying, why did I move the camera? I should have stayed right here. This was clearly the best spot. So what I started to do was just leave the camera in one place. And that gave me the ability to actually blend time together. So I'll explain this a little bit more in a minute, but what you're seeing here is a blue hour in the foreground, so you see the lights, and you're seeing about 15 minutes of time before. So this is about 15 minutes of time put together into a seamless shot, since the tripod hasn't moved. Now, you have to imagine it this way too. So this is another view of Santorini. If you want to get clouds, you have to go, it's best October, November, and it's not as busy too, which is really nice. But basically, the idea behind this is, if I shot a time lapse, right? I was able to show you guys an entire transition from day to night or night to day. If I shoot video, I'm able to capture this. If you're sitting in a location and you're watching a sunset, you're watching the sunset here, you're thinking about, wow, that sun's just about to hit the horizon, it's just about to dip below the sea line, then all of the colors are changing, you're noticing how the purple hues are changing the clouds, then you're noticing how the lights are coming on in the city, then you're noticing all these beautiful lights, the different lighting. You're hearing things, you're feeling things, you're having sensation. When you go back and you describe a sunset to somebody, what are you describing? An event or a single image? It's an event. It's moments in time put together. That's why it's hard to represent in a single photograph. So what I've tried to do over the last few years is blend time together. Again, using a stationary camera and blending parts of the sunset in with parts of the blue hour. So mixing and finding my own blend of that natural and artificial light, usually around 10 to 30 minutes apart, depending on how slow. If it's an actual blue hour or a blue minute, it might be 10 minutes, it might be an hour. And it's given me the ability to do some really interesting things. And I'll have a composite build of this too. But what's interesting too is the sky is what caught my eye first. because by the time the lights came on in the foreground, the sky was blue. And if you do go to Japan, you might be frustrated with their skies. It's usually like really soft blue or really soft white or really soft. So when you actually have clouds and texture, you get really excited in Japan. But I wanted to put this together. And I've been doing this for a long time, and it actually started, this is a really old shot of mine in Venice. And it started because first I wanted to see the lights from the city and the sunset. But what frustrated me were the gondola, or the gondole. And I wanted to be able to capture, a really nice pattern of these boats moving through the canal. Now this was easier in 2011, I'm going to let you know, because there weren't selfie sticks back then. There were far less iPadographers, because we take photos with our iPhone down here, but iPadographers do this. I will never understand the psychology of this. We don't hold our phone up like that, but I guess you have to, because the flap of the cover gets in your face if you don't. I don't know. So I had to wait there. So first I collected the elements that I knew I could control, which is the time of day. I can't control the weather, but the time of day and the time of day for the buildings. And then I just basically changed my settings. So if I was shooting before for the buildings at f8, maybe my shutter speed was probably like 6 seconds or so at the blue hour. I changed it. So I turned the ISO up, went down to f2.8 so I could capture just the boats. And then for another 20 minutes, I just captured different boats, until I found not only the pattern of them moving through the canal, but no Hello Kitty t-shirts, exactly. So you have to really work hard to get the gondola shot these days. So I call these are variables, the sky and the lights. I don't know if people were on the two windows there on the right. That's a variable. I have no idea if they're going to be home and those lights are going to be on. But I can control with patience how I capture the boats. Can't control if it's going to be a great sunset. So certain things you give yourself more control over, and you can create something a little bit more unique. I like this too. I have a different version of this you're going to see as well, but this is also Santorini. I've done a lot of projects in Greece, and Santorini's it's like a playground for photography. When I say Santorini, that's actually the town of Ia, which everybody calls Oya, because it's O-I-A, but it's actually pronounced Ia. It's so amazing. I suggest you guys go if you have a chance. But you can see here, beautiful sky and lights in the foreground. And here too, New York City, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated because we're dealing with long exposures, the skyline of Manhattan and the streaks of the clouds. It's 30-second exposure, multiple stage blend, blending the colors, and you can see that the light is casting on the pylons, but we still have the skyline of Manhattan in the background. I can ask questions at the end, but I will tell you that this is a little bit to the left of the selfie spot. And if you've never been to the Brooklyn side, when you get there, you'll be like, okay, yeah, that's the selfie spot. Let me just walk a little bit further. I will have a composite build of this as well. So this is blending. This is blending time together. And it culminated with me with this certain photograph in this certain place. So in the beginning, I showed you guys the late golden hour, right? But this is what I really wanted to do there, something a little bit different. Everybody was going for sunrise, I went for sunset. And believe it or not, Mount Fuji, they call it a cloud magnet because it's not even a tall mountain, but if there's one cloud in the sky, it's stuck to Mount Fuji, like the top of it. This is the most frustrating thing. You're like, come on, cloud, please, please. But then it generates its own weather with the snow and the cloud changes all day. So this was a little window during sunset of about, 3 to 4 minutes, where the clouds just opened up around the top of Mount Fuji. And you can see that Mount Fuji is illuminated on the right side, and this drives a friend of mine who works for Pixar, who's one of their lighting technical directors. This drives him insane when he looks at it, because you have a light source of the sun from the right illuminating Mount Fuji on the right, Terrain Pagoda on the left, cherry blossoms from the bottom left corner to the right, and the city from within. So there are so many different light sources going on in this photo, but it's not that much time blended together. But it all just kind of swirls around the Mount Fuji. So I have a little bit of time. There is one interesting story about this. Now, this took me 3 years and multiple attempts to be able to get this photo. I recently went back to do a film with SmugMug. We did a SmugMug film here. And it was so busy with people that I found out that now people were camping out overnight just to get a spot in the morning. They built a viewing platform. They had free Terrain Pagoda Wi-Fi. They built a parking lot. And I felt so bad about this that when I was giving presentations for a while, I was telling people that I felt bad. that I maybe help contribute to this. And a friend of mine who showed me this spot 5 years ago, I was like, Yuga, he posted it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I feel like I helped contribute to it being so busy. And he's like, no, Elias-san, it was your fault. And I'm like, no, I was just kidding. He's like, no, literally, it was your fault. The guy who works in the tourism for the town saw your photo and made it the mascot of the town. So I was like, oh, wow. It's a shame, because when I was there, I'd be up there with just a few Japanese photographers. People be hiking, doing their morning exercises, all these things. And it was a very special place. And now I felt that I helped, with this kind of photography, brought too many people there just for the iconic selfie. A few months ago, I was at Adobe Max. Another Japanese friend of mine was there. I told him this story, and he said, no, Elias-san, you saved that place. I'm like, what do you mean I saved the place? You're just trying to make me feel better. He said, before he saw your photo, he was going to close the park. I said, really? He's like, yeah. So without him seeing that photo, it would have been closed 2 weeks later. And I was like, great, couldn't you have told me this a year ago? Because I've been feeling horrible about it. But it also now is opening up another project in Japan where there's all these beautiful locations. Because there's certain places that people are going, what I'm doing with even different islands in Greece, is we're collecting a series of photos that shows people that there are other places to photograph. There are other good selfie spots, really close to locations that they already know about. So in Japan, there's 3 or 4 of these locations that I'm looking at with a friend of mine now to help them keep it open. Because if they actually get more tourism in these areas, they can leave these places open for the locals. So it's just still learning about this as I go. So yes, I kind of destroyed it, but I kind of saved it. I don't know how to feel anymore. So all of that is fun. All of those things, all of those techniques, blending, kind of culminated with me when I got into astrophotography. And I call this creating the extraordinary because cosmic things need to happen, right? Our Earth moves, we're able to get star trails. Have many of you guys been to Petra, Jordan? Yeah, okay. Did you guys go because of Indiana Jones? Yeah, me too. Who went because of Transformers? Nobody yet, right? Do you know this is where the Decepticons are now? Yes. Yeah, my nephew told me that. So I think I'm gonna, because of that movie, a new generation of people are gonna be inspired to go there. But yeah, apparently this is where the Decepticons are. So this is really cool. Petra by night, they do it 3 nights or 4 nights a week, depending on the season. They actually light all these candles by hand. I was able to get in early and right before everybody arrived, and then I just did star trails for a while, and I'll explain that a little bit more. The cosmic elements are really fun because it gives us the ability to do a few things. So this is that same area in Santorini. You saw the one with the sky and the lights. Now, when I got into photography and I had a section called Watching the Weather, I got so depressed when there was a blue sky. Because there's no clouds, there's no drama, I can't really do the style of photography that I want. So I decided to get into astrophotography because if I have a crystal clear sky, chances are I can do something with that. And even in light city environments, I would say, I have a friend who does this in Tokyo and he gets a few star trails, it's pretty amazing. But even in small towns in Italy and Greece, European towns, villages, you can still get some star trails. And in this case, facing east, it's giving this effect like shooting stars or falling stars, something completely different, a different feel. But again, utilizing that time. So at this point now, if it's a blue sky, I have to go out. If it's a thunderstorm, I have to go out. If it's a typhoon or a hurricane, I have to go out. There's no time to rest anymore. You can find all these ways you can create something unique. And it's interesting too, because as far as cosmic elements go, it doesn't get any more cosmic than the Northern Lights. Some of you guys have seen the Northern Lights. I'll say this with confidence, that anybody who's seen the Northern Lights still wants to see them again. Yeah, it's life-changing in a way, isn't it? To actually see it. And it's cool because all of these things have to line up. Obviously the KP index has to be high. In other words, there has to be energy coming from the sun, hitting the magnetic sphere of the Earth, and then it has to be falling on you or around you because the Earth is rotating too. And you have to be in the right place, and there obviously has to be a semi-clear sky. So all of these things have to come into place perfectly. I've never found a style of landscape photography or night photography where so many things need to line up for everything to work out perfectly. Positioning, timing, season, activity of the sun, everything, even the moon phase, because the moon can wash it out. So it's really special when you're able to see and capture these really neat moments. And this is cool. This is basically what I really like star trails. It's really fun. And essentially the technique that I use for star trails, there are different techniques and different variations of it for different lighting situations. But essentially I shoot a series of 30-second exposures, and then I bring all of those in. Let's say it's 300 layers like this into Photoshop. If Photoshop doesn't crash for some reason, I take all of those layers and switch to the light and blending mode. With the light and blending mode, they all sort of show through. If I'm shooting towards the east or the west, the celestial meridian or equator, I get the streaks across the sky. Now, notice how it's starting to bend towards the corners. I'm shooting at 14 millimeter, actually, 14 to 24, actually. So you can see sort of the bend where I'm starting to shoot around the pole. And if you shoot north to south, you actually get the rotation of the Earth. This is one of my favorite photos that I have for a few reasons. One, it's the closest thing to photographing an alien planet that I've ever come to. This is near Surabaya. This is Mount Bromo in Indonesia. There's the collapsed volcano there. Semeru is the one in the background. Now this is actually, these are active volcanoes as well. It's a caldera that's at altitude. So it's not really fog, it's clouds that are sort of going into this caldera and then falling down on there. And it's a really interesting place. So it's about 250 to 300 shots. And as it rotates, you guys actually see the speed of this is really cool. Notice how there's like shallow rotation towards the pole and long rotation around this. It's really neat. And my dream, I'm going to share my dream with you guys, is to photograph Earth from above, from space. That's what I'd love to ultimately do. If you guys have heard about the SpaceX Mars exploration, where they were offering to people the one way and you never know if you're going to come back, I'd be that guy. My wife hates me for that, but I could, yeah, totally go, yeah. Even if I'm going to have to Matt Damon on the Mars Forever and take care of everything. So I'm from Florida. We have NASA, SpaceX, seen all the shuttle launches. So we get the news from our friends. 2 years ago, NASA had an open application process for new astronauts. They were looking for the next wave of space explorers. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a resume. I'm going to fill all this out, and I'm going to send it in. So I got everything together. I sent this in to NASA, and guess what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. No email, no call, no maybe next time. But to be fair, an art degree probably wasn't what they were looking for. It was probably like engineer, rocket scientist, all these qualified things. I'll try again next time. And I've been tweeting at Elon Musk. He still hasn't replied. One of these days. Until then, we have to find locations like this and plan and prepare and know the times that we're going to shoot. But it does come down to beautifying all that. Usually I have these animations so I can drink a Red Bull, but I left it on that side. So basically, I hate having to walk in front of the projector to get to the Red Bull, but caffeine is important to photography as well. Everything that you guys have seen so far is based on a few simple concepts. So none of the post-processing that I do, unless absolutely necessary, is by nature complex. So I like to use simple methods. And it starts out with raw file adjustment. That can be a single raw, just pushing the shadows, highlights, things like that. Or sometimes we have to do some exposure blending. Now that can be because you shot brackets and something's a little bright, you need to bring in shadows from something else, or it could be time blending. Step 3 is the important part, and that's color and contrast adjustments. Now the last one, details, noise, sharpening, softening, things like that, the importance of that is directly proportionate to the output medium that you're producing for. So if you're doing stuff just for Instagram, don't even bother with number 4. Like it's 1080 by 1080, nobody's going to notice. If you're doing wall-size prints, if you're doing really big work, even banner things, when you start walking up to things, like and looking at details, then you're going to start to see if there was noise reduction, if there was sharpening, if there's vignetting or haloing and things like that. So that step is really based on the output. Now, let's take a look at some before and afters. So this is Seljalandsfoss in southern Iceland. Now, a couple things are going on here. Here's the before, single raw. Here's the after. First thing, highlights are blown out in the waterfall, so raw file adjustment. Shadows need to be boosted in the foreground. And I want you guys, I'm going to walk to the other side again. Over here, right here, that's a tour bus. So nothing says remote destination like Chinese tour bus. So you must remove the tour buses as well. So that's some basic object removal. But basically a single RAW. So let's take a look at another one. This is Hallstatt again, straight out of camera. I believe it was the D810 straight out of camera. That little streak in the water there, that's a duck. Now, I'm getting into wildlife photography, but as a landscape photographer, wildlife would piss me off. Like really sparrows, really seagulls. Come on, guys! Like you're leaving streaks in a long exposure. Birds land, ducks glide through the water, quack, 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 all over the place. So a few things have to be removed, but for the most part, it's just balancing the light, balancing the colors. So our eyes see most colors. Most of us, our eyes see most colors. And our camera does too. But the thing, what happens during the blue hours, we have light accumulation. So we're getting this reflectivity from the blue on the roofs, on the buildings. Maybe those nice colors on the right aren't as vivid because they're reflecting that blue color. And that goes beyond white balance. That's actually just the color accumulation. So if you look at the right side, pay attention to the houses and also the reflection. What I've actually done is gone in there and made sure that I've brought back those colors in the reflection and brought some of the luminosity back on that too. And then the only real object removal besides the darn duck is the clock tower has a little bit of scaffolding on it. So just little things like that. You have to remove scaffolding and things like that. This is the beach that the Kiwis gave up building to the islands. You can see a footprint there. It might have been my own footprint. That's another thing too. If you guys are shooting in sand, always approach the scene slowly. I don't know if you guys have put footprints in your own scenes before. So the other thing is, it's a Kiwi weekend. There's a Heineken bottle back there. Some things need to be removed and cleaned up. But two things happen here. One, highlights in the left, right? And shadows in the pylons. And if you look at those, you can see when I move that shadow slider, there's all that color was back. Just because it was underexposed, because I was trying to expose for everything. So really easy, just cleaning up a few things that need to be there in the highlights and the shadows. But what if you want to do something different? That's Mount Cook on the South Island of New Zealand. This is the road to Mount Cook, and the name of the photo is the road to Mount Cook. I wasn't feeling particularly creative that day when I named it. Standing there at about 120 millimeter and sort of compressing the scene. I made it look like I'm standing in the middle of the road, but I'm not. I'm standing right to the side of the road. And I tried the middle thing, and I was like, it's not going to happen. Like the car's, it's deadly. But what I wanted to do was, after the sun was just setting and I was getting into the blue hour, what I wanted to do was capture something a little bit different, and that was the trails of lights going down the path. And I was terrified standing in the middle of the road. I moved to the side, but as soon as it started to get dark out, there were no more cars, which was really weird. So I had my friends drive back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for me. I've used this technique a few times now. Like whoever has a car, is like they're the ones. If you're on the phone or the walkie-talkie, it was filming with FStoppers. It was all walkie-talkie. Like, are you finished yet? I'm like, not yet. One more time. I'm like, really? Okay, hurry up. Series of 30-second exposures just put on. So this is when we get into blending moments in time. And here's basically what it looks like. Here is Osaka Castle. This is called floating castle, they call it. It's floating on a bed of cherry blossoms. But it's still a little bit dull. But what really was nice is the sky. You see like there's a little bit of white on the right side, there's some blue on the left, a little bit more gray on the upper left. So what I did is I waited here, camera in one place. I was very lucky there was no wind that day. 15 minutes later, the lights turned on in the cherry blossoms. So I overlaid that a little bit. And then after that, I just added the contrast. So this was raw file adjustment, this is exposure blending, and this is contrast adjustment. So those 3 steps. Now obviously, I'm using a high pass filter, just so you guys know, for my sharpening and doing some softening. You won't see that on the screen, obviously, but that's behind the scenes. So step 3 and 4 are kind of blended together in this. Here's Santorini again. I really like Santorini. Potential for a sky. This is straight out of the camera. Potential for a really nice sky. Sky needs to be enhanced, and then I also want to bring in the lights. So this is just using a blending mode to bring those lights in. Now it's really fun. So this is something else that I do too. If you're shooting Nikon, you're shooting basically everything. Well, first of all, if you're shooting Canon, I'm sorry, because it doesn't work as well. If you're shooting every other camera in the world, we can pull a little bit more out of the shadows. than we can in the highlights. Usually up to 2.5 stops with the new Nikon cameras as well. So I'll tend to underexpose. So this is underexposed sky. Sky needs to be adjusted, and then obviously I need to bring in the blue hour on top. So what it's kind of cool is, as long as the camera doesn't move, you're actually layering elements of the same thing over top. So it's elements of itself. It's not like trying to take a brand new sky and make a mask and put it in a scene. You're just able to use subtle transparency sometimes, subtle masks and everything, and the geometry always lines up. So the result ends up looking much more natural. And it gets really fun. And it doesn't just work with scenes like that, but this is the most frustrating thing when I started shooting landscape photography, was wait for the epic sunset, and then when I get a beautiful sunset, what happens to the foreground? It just drives me crazy. So why not just back it up 15 minutes and use the foreground from 15 minutes earlier and balance it out? Now, aside from a little bit of light on those trees in the foreground, this is also a single raw for the most part. It's a lot of power to be able to bring that back. And again, landscape environments similar to cityscape environments, most beautiful sky, most flat, boring foreground. Well, what about 15 minutes later? Everything comes back. Now, I'm half Italian, so I'm allowed to complain. This was the one time they were actually doing maintenance on the Vatican. And I'm not used to Rome doing any maintenance whatsoever. So I was a little startled, but now if you go, it's all LED light. It's actually energy efficient. I'm very happy about it. But for the whole week, the Vatican wasn't on. If you guys follow my social media, this is the image that Canon used. Does anybody follow that story? A few people laughed. Yeah, I'm not going to get into it, but this was, I might have to take it out of the presentation because people usually start laughing and mumbling things about Canon, which is also why I'm presenting for Nikon and not Canon, probably. Or ever again. Not like ever did. So here's that shot of Hong Kong. This is really cool. I was just staying with a friend of mine in Dubai who lived in Hong Kong for years, and I was calling this the rare Hong Kong sun. And he says, I was in Hong Kong for 2 years and I never saw the sun in the morning. It's that kind of environment. So here's the sun rising. This is summertime, actually. If you plan using an app like PhotoPills or the Photographer's Ephemeris, any kind of sun positioning app, around July into August, June, July, August, you actually get the sunrise over the river, which is really nice. So there's the sunrise, but I wanted to bring in the lights and put it all together and create something. So that's moments in time. Now that's 2 stages, 1, 2. But sometimes it gets a little bit more complicated. So this is shot, 30-second exposure, the Brooklyn Bridge pylons, and it'll actually come up on a map search, Brooklyn Bridge pylons. I have no idea what they were used for. 30-second exposure, sun's just starting to set. I really like the way the clouds were shaped and the color, a lot of potential, but I lost the light on the foreground. The previous exposure had the light on the foreground, but the sun was blowing out the frame because it was in front of the clouds. So I brought those highlights back in, and it's natural having highlights from a warm sky. After that, I waited a little bit longer, brought in the lights from the city, and after that, it's those last steps of contrast adjustment to bring it all together. This was shot for a client too, and they wanted the blending style. They wanted me to do this, so it gives me a lot of power over the elements. Because if I tell somebody, it's like, well, if you want that shot of Italy, I need 4 years and 12 visits. That's not as realistic as, hey, yeah, we could do it this weekend, or if the weather's good in 3 days. This gives me the ability to have more control. So this is I would say 1, 2, 3-stage blend. This isn't really post-processing, this is the blending. This is post-processing to me, is when you start to make everything work together and sort of harmonize with those elements. And it's fun, and you have to prepare. I love this. This is really fun to show. So this is me set up at night, capturing the star trails. So this is the accumulation of the stars, every 30-second exposure stacked up sequentially. And then what you're seeing on the left is selfie, 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 light painting, light painting, light painting. So this is over the course of sometimes an entire night. So by itself, not too usable, right? By itself, not too usable. So what I'll do is I'll set up earlier and I'll capture what I call a controlled element. And what I mean by a controlled element is, one, have you guys set up your cameras in complete darkness before and tried to focus? Mm-hmm. It's really tough sometimes. So what I do here is I'm there before sunset, I set everything up, I lock in my composition, and I also shoot this, a controlled frame. This is shot at f8, it's a longer exposure, it's fully in focus, it's shot at a very low ISO, because I know when I get to this time, I'm going to have to change my settings. This is going to be something like 1600 ISO, f2.8, something a little bit different. So what I do is I take this plus this to create this. So that's pretty interesting, right? And what it gives me is the full level of control over the foreground, all the natural light that I had just post-sunset into blue hour, and full control over the stars. And it also, you know, gets rid of the selfie thing. This is actually a really beautiful place, the Church of the Good Shepherd. I actually recommend, if you're going to visit on a cloudy night. The reason is it keeps a lot of the people away. It's a really beautiful location, but it's very easy to get to. Now, it's interesting because I do teach all this, and I just want to kind of let you guys know that I do teach through video tutorials that I've created with FStoppers, this entire process. And it's also one of those things, when I started creating video education, it's because I was very frustrated with the quality of what was available on YouTube. When I learned to use Photoshop in